Think about where you were 1 year ago today. Not in a general way. Actually think about it. What were you worried about? What were you hoping for? What were you telling yourself you were going to start doing? What were you avoiding? Where were you sleeping? Who were you talking to? What were you reading? What were you doing with your evenings? Now ask yourself honestly, how different is any of that right now? Because for most people, the answer is uncomfortable, not devastating, not shameful, just uncomfortable. The same job, the same habits, maybe the same frustrations, wearing slightly different clothes. And the strangest part? Most people sense this. They feel the sameness. They notice that time keeps moving, and they're not really moving with it. And still, they don't change. Not because they can't, not because they don't want to, but because they never stop to ask themselves a simple, almost brutal question. What exactly am I doing with my time? Not in theory, not according to what I planned, but actually, what am I doing with my time? That question matters more than almost any other question you could ask yourself. And I think the reason most people avoid it isn't laziness. It's something closer to fear. Because once you sit with that question long enough, you start to understand something that most people spend their whole lives running from. You start to understand that time doesn't wait. Not for your readiness, not for your confidence, not for the right moment. Time just goes. And 1 year from now, you'll be somewhere. The only real question is whether you had anything to do with where that somewhere is. I want to talk about a year. Just 1 year. Not a lifetime. Not a decade. 1 year. Because I've watched people, ordinary people, not exceptional ones, not people with rare talent or unusual luck. I've watched them take a single year seriously, and I mean really seriously, and come out the other side almost unrecognizable. Not in a dramatic, movie trailer way. In a quiet, accumulated, deeply real way. The kind of change that doesn't announce itself loudly, but shows up in everything. The way they carry themselves. The things they reach for in the morning. The conversations they're able to have. The fear they used to feel that just isn't there anymore. And then I've watched other people take that same year and do nothing with it. Not because they were bad people. Not because they weren't smart. But because they were waiting. They were always waiting. For things to settle down. For the timing to get better. For the fear to go away on its own. For some outside signal that now was the right time to start living differently. That signal never comes. That's the thing nobody tells you. The fear doesn't go away before you start. It goes away because you start. And the gap between those two things, between waiting for the fear to disappear versus moving forward while it's still there, that gap is where most people's years get lost. So let's talk about what actually changes a person in a year. Not the Instagram version of it, not the highlight reel, the actual mechanics of it. Because it doesn't start with motivation. I know that sounds strange, but it doesn't. Motivation is a feeling, and feelings come and go. You can feel incredibly motivated at midnight watching a video, and by 9 a.m. the next morning, when life shows up with all its ordinary friction, that feeling is already fading. That's not a character flaw. That's just what feelings do. What actually changes a person is something quieter than motivation. It's decision, a real one. Not the kind you make out loud to impress people, not the kind you announce to your friends to feel accountable, but the private kind. The kind where you sit alone somewhere. Maybe you're in your car, maybe it's late, maybe you're tired, and you just get honest with yourself. Completely honest. About where you are, about where you said you'd be by now, about the gap between those two things. And in that moment, something shifts. Not loudly, sometimes just barely. But something shifts, and you make a choice. Not to be perfect, not to suddenly become a different person. Just to take the next year more seriously than you've taken the last one. That's where it starts. With honesty, not inspiration. Because here's what I've noticed about people who actually change. And I mean really change. Not surface level, not temporary. They tend to have a moment of real clarity at some point. A moment where they stopped lying to themselves. Where they put down the story they'd been telling about why things were the way they were, and they just looked at the reality of their choices, their actual choices, not their intentions, not what they meant to do, what they actually did. That can be a hard thing to sit with. It can feel embarrassing, even painful. But there's something on the other side of that honesty that you can't get to any other way. A kind of freedom. Because once you stop defending where you are, you can actually start moving. Now, the first thing I want to talk about, and this is something most people seriously underestimate, is the importance of what you put into your mind every single day. Not what you do with your body, what you put into your mind. Think about it this way. You spend years being shaped by everything around you. Your environment, the people you grew up with, the things you were told about yourself, about what was possible, about what kind of person you were. And most of that happened without your consent. You were just a kid, absorbing the world. You didn't choose what beliefs to install. You just got them. But at some point, and this is a point a lot of people miss, at some point, you become responsible for what goes into your mind, for the ideas you expose yourself to, for the voices you let influence you, for the books you read or don't read, for how you spend the 30 minutes before you fall asleep, for what you're listening to when you drive. I know someone who decided, in one single year, that he was going to read one book a month. Just one. He wasn't a reader. He didn't like reading, really. He found it slow, but he decided that for 1 year, he was going to do it anyway. Not 2 books a week, not some huge ambitious program. Just 1 book a month. By the end of that year, something had happened to him. Not just because of the information in those books, though that mattered, but because of the act of doing it, because he proved something to himself, because his mind started working differently, because the things he thought about, the questions he asked, the way he saw his own situation, all of it started to change. And that change compounded. It fed itself. That's the thing about what you put into your mind. It shapes how you see everything else. Your problems start looking different. Your possibilities start looking different. You start having thoughts you wouldn't have had before, not because you're smarter, but because you're feeding your thinking with better material. This isn't complicated. It's actually embarrassingly simple. But simple isn't the same as easy, because the easiest thing, the thing your brain naturally drifts toward, is entertainment, distraction, comfort. And there's nothing wrong with entertainment and distraction, I'm not saying that. But if the entire texture of your mental life is just distraction, you shouldn't be surprised when nothing changes. Your mind gets what you give it. And over a year, the difference between someone who is intentional about that and someone who isn't is enormous. Absolutely enormous. Now let's talk about the people in your life, because this is one that people get defensive about, and I understand why, but it has to be said honestly. You are, in a very real and measurable way, the average of the conversations you're in every day. Not just the people you know, the conversations. The way people around you talk about life, about money, about effort, about possibility, about other people. The assumptions that live in those conversations. The ceilings that are treated as facts. Most people never examine this. They accept the environment they're in as the natural backdrop of their life. But it isn't natural. It's constructed. It was built by the choices you've made about who to spend time with, what spaces to inhabit, what voices to let in, and it can be changed. This doesn't mean cutting people off dramatically. This doesn't mean deciding your old friends aren't good enough. That's not what I'm talking about. What I'm talking about is being intentional about adding, about finding even 1 or 2 people, in person, in books, in conversations online, wherever, who are operating at a level you want to reach, who think about life in a way that challenges how you think, who make you feel, after talking to them, like you should be doing more with your time. That feeling matters. Who gives you that feeling? Go toward those people. Now I want to talk about something that I think is at the center of almost every person's struggle with change. And it's this. Most people are fighting a war they don't even know they're in. The war between who they are and who they keep telling themselves they're going to be. You have a self-image, a picture of yourself that you carry around. And almost everything you do, every day, is filtered through that picture. If your self-image says, I'm someone who tries things and gives up, then every time you hit difficulty, that identity is going to pull you back toward giving up. Not because you're weak, but because you're being consistent with who you believe you are. We are deeply wired to be consistent with our self-image. This is why you can want change and still not change. Because wanting isn't enough. If your deeper belief about yourself says that change isn't really available to you, that you've tried before, that you always end up back in the same place, that other people can change, but you have some specific flaw that makes it harder for you. That belief, whatever form it takes, is the thing that needs to be addressed. And it doesn't get addressed through positive thinking, not through repeating affirmations you don't believe. It gets addressed through evidence, small evidence, accumulated over time. This is why the small actions matter so much, and why people so often get this backwards. People think you need a big dramatic change to feel differently about yourself. But actually, it works the other way. The small changes, done consistently, done even when you don't feel like it, those are the things that build a new self-image from the inside out. Every morning you get up when you said you would. Every time you go to the gym when you didn't feel like it. Every evening you put down the phone and did the work instead. Every promise you made to yourself and kept. Each one of those is a vote for a different version of yourself. And over a year, those votes pile up. And at some point, your self-image starts to catch up with your actions. You stop seeing yourself as someone who tries and fails, and start seeing yourself as someone who follows through. And once that shift happens, once the identity shifts, everything gets easier. Not easy, easier. But you have to start earning that shift. You can't think your way into it. You have to live your way into it. Let's talk about goals for a minute, because this is another place where people get confused. Most people either don't have clear goals, or they have goals but no plan behind them, or they have a plan but give up after the first setback. I want to talk about why that last one happens so much. You set a goal. You're serious about it. You start well. Then life interferes, because it always does. And you have a bad week. You miss a few days. You make a mistake. And then something strange happens. Instead of adjusting and continuing, you start over. You reset. You give yourself a new start date, a new Monday, a new first of the month, and the cycle repeats. The problem isn't discipline. The problem is the expectation that the path should be smooth, that real progress looks like a straight line. But it doesn't. Real progress is messy. It has good stretches and terrible stretches. It has weeks where you feel unstoppable and weeks where you feel like you've lost everything you built. And the difference between people who change and people who don't isn't that the changers never have bad weeks. They have bad weeks too. The difference is what they do after a bad week. Whether they treat it as evidence that they can't do this, or just as a bad week that's now over. A bad week is just a bad week. It doesn't mean anything about you unless you decide it does. 1 year is a long time. Long enough to build something real if you're patient with the process. But it's also short enough that you can picture the end of it. And that matters, because sometimes the reason people don't commit to change is that it feels infinite. Like they're signing up for a life sentence of effort. But 1 year, you can commit to 1 year. You can decide that for this 1 year, you're going to take your habits seriously. Take your learning seriously. Take your time seriously. And then see what you look like on the other side. Now I want to be honest about something. Because everything I've said so far might sound manageable. And it is manageable. But there are going to be moments, and I want you to hear this clearly, there are going to be moments in that year where you feel completely alone in this. Where everyone around you seems comfortable with staying the same, and you're the only one fighting against your own comfort zone. Where the effort starts to feel like it isn't producing enough results fast enough. Where you seriously wonder if it's worth it. Those moments are not a sign that you're doing it wrong. They're actually a sign that you're doing it right. Because real change requires you to move through discomfort, not around it. And the discomfort is sharpest right before something breaks open. Most people quit right there, right at the edge of something real, because it doesn't look like progress from the inside. From the inside, it just looks like pain. But from the outside, from the perspective of time, that's exactly the point where the work was about to pay off. I don't know how to make that easier. I really don't. Except to say, know that it's going to happen. Know that there will be a point in this year where you won't feel like continuing, where the motivation is completely gone, where the results feel distant and the effort feels heavy. Expect that. Plan for it. And decide in advance, decide right now, that when that moment comes, you're going to keep going anyway. Not because you feel like it, because you decided. That decision, made in advance, is one of the most powerful things you can do for yourself. Let's talk about what a year of real change looks like on the other side. Because I don't want to leave this theoretical. I want you to actually imagine it. 1 year from today, imagine someone who, for the past 365 days, got up a little earlier than felt comfortable. Read something worth reading, not perfectly, not every day without fail, but consistently. Moved their body regularly, said no to things that were pulling them toward a smaller version of their life, had 1 or 2 hard conversations they'd been avoiding, saved a little more than felt easy, spent more time on things that mattered and less time on things that just filled the silence. That person isn't a superhuman. They didn't do anything extraordinary on any given day, but added up, across a full year, those choices create someone different, not in theory, in practice, in the actual texture of their life, in what they know, in what they've proven to themselves they're capable of, in the confidence that comes, not from believing you can do something, but from having done it. That person is available to you. That is not an exaggeration. It's not motivational fluff. It is a real, achievable version of you that exists on the other side of 1 year of different choices. But here's the thing I want to leave you with, and this might be the most important thing I've said. The year is going to pass either way. That's it. That's the whole thing. The year is going to pass. 12 months from now, you're going to be somewhere. You're going to be a version of yourself that was shaped by the choices you made between now and then. And the question isn't whether you're capable of changing. You are. Everyone I've ever seen change was someone who, at some earlier point, didn't think they could. The question is just whether this year is going to be one where you look back and feel like it mattered, like you used it, like you actually moved. Because the weight of a wasted year isn't the year itself. It's the version of yourself you didn't become, the things you could know by now that you still don't, the confidence you could have earned that you're still waiting for, the life you could be living that's still sitting in the future, pushed back again, to next year, to when things settle down, to when you feel ready. You don't get that time back. Nobody does. But you still have the time that's in front of you. And right now, that time is still open. It hasn't been decided yet. You're sitting right at the edge of it. What you do with it is completely up to you.